There are some studies out there that connect the fact that if you have higher debt going into retirement, you may have a lower probability of finding the satisfaction you're looking for in retirement. In this video, I want to share with you how to deal with that debt you might have so you may have a happier retirement journey. But before we get there, subscribe to my channel, click on the notification bell so you're alerted to when we post new videos. I have over 30 years in this business, and I want to share with you what I know and some of the conversations I have with my clients so you can make sure you don't step on the same landmines they may have. So I find this interesting in that I've always believed that our industry has done a lousy job of preparing you for retirement. You know, they talk a lot about money management and portfolio diversification, but they don't touch on debt. And I believe the industry just doesn't think it's a sexy topic to deal with, that, you know, it's not something that can provide smiles or growth or something that we can understand. But the reality is, because we don't prepare you properly, that many end up going into retirement with more debt or more of the kind of debt they shouldn't have. And it is this type of situation that studies show may impact the level of satisfaction that people have when they transition into retirement. There was a study done in September of 2020, done by the Employee Benefits Research Institute, EBRI. And they took a look at a couple of thousand different people, and their conclusion was based on the feedback they got from these people. And they separated them into three different groups of folks: those who had the highest degree of satisfaction, those who had a moderate degree, and those who had the least amount. And without question, those who had the least amount of satisfaction were typically those who had the most debt, because that debt was impacting their current cash flow, and cash is king in retirement. It's not necessarily how much you have in assets or how well your portfolio did. It's how much cash you have and the freedom to spend it. So I want to share with you, in a condensed version, a class that I give to organizations to help their employees get a better handle on debt as they're facing retirement. So let's get started with it. So everything we do is a juggling act. I'm not here to just focus on one particular line item. That's not what life is all about. We all have a number of different things we have to deal with, but a lot of it does deal with, and we need to focus on, the impact of the type of money that we have and how much we owe, the debt. And there are a number of different financial obligations in general that we're dealing with. So as a general rule, and I put down 6 different items: day-to-day cash flow and debt, and that those are connected together, because typically the higher debt that you have and the higher the payments that you have, it'll impact how you're feeling. And studies show that it is the day-to-day cash flow that can impact how you feel about your journey. Second is, and I'll talk about it from, if you haven't retired yet, in terms of funding for college for your kids, or if you've already retired and you're about to sign off on a college loan for your grandchild, then I want to share with you a very important tip here. And this is about debt, and it's about how it could impact your cash flow. So if you as a grandparent are doing the good thing in signing off on a loan for the educational funding that your grandchild needs, but if things don't work out perfectly and that child has an issue and or that loan goes into default, that's the real key. If the government loan goes into default, then the government can come back, because you are the signatory, and garnish part or all of your Social Security income. So again, this gets back to a cash flow situation. So the message here, just be careful, understand what you're signing and what could happen if it goes wrong. You know, we want to make sure that we're accumulating a nest egg for retirement. Then we've got good things, right? We want to go on vacation. We want to create, and deal with the home improvement projects. We want to make sure we have enough emergency reserves because that oftentimes gives us the sleep at night, the peace of mind that we're looking for. I think it's really important as we take a look at the cash flow and debt management. I want you to either go Google cash flow worksheet or sign up for Quicken or Mint.com, but I want you to understand what your cash flow is now and what impact debt is having on it. So what I really want to dive into now is what I call 5 tips for managing your credit score. And the reason I really want to dive into this is because oftentimes it is the credit card debt that is impacting your cash flow. And I want to make sure that we understand this. I mean, we've heard the mantra all along, if you have a low FICO score, then you're going to have high interest rate payments. And in historically low interest rate environment that we're at right now, you can really get those payments down really low. But if you don't, those credit cards could be 12, 15, 18%, and they're not tax deductible. So you want to make sure that you have the highest FICO score possible. I'll talk about that in just a moment. You want to make sure you don't pay just the minimum. And I want to share with you a particular tip. And I want to give you sort of a caveat here. I want you to go back to your financial advisor or your tax accountant and find out if this is something that is appropriate for you. But let me give you the idea, the strategy right now. Let's say, for example, you have high credit card debt, $10,000, $20,000, $50,000. And let's assume that you own a home. And for many during this time, we've been very fortunate. We've seen our home values increase a fair amount. And if you do have equity in that home that has increased, then maybe you go back and do a refinance. And with that refinance, pay down all or most of that credit card debt, transferring, if you will, that 12 or 15 or 18% non-tax deductible debt to a possible 3 or 4% mortgage rate that is tax deductible. Could save you a lot of money. But part of the issue here is if you think that you're going to end up with that kind of debt again in another year or two, don't do this because it's more about your behavior. And I want you to address that. So again, I'm not recommending this to you. I'm just saying it's a potential strategy and you need to talk to your advisors about whether or not this is going to be good for you. So on this slide, we'll go into some details. You can get your score at this URL. I would make sure that you check your Experian, your TransUnion, or your Equifax reporting agencies. You always want to make sure you can correct your information. There is a series of studies out there that indicate somewhere around 70% of those who check on their scores find there's some misinformation or disinformation on the score that could impact your FICO score. One tip for you is to know how to improve your score. It's interesting, my daughter, a couple of years ago, she was having some issues with her credit, and she fortunately paid down one of the cards, and she called the company up and canceled it. You would think that was a good thing to have been done. But unfortunately, there's actually a 5-step process. You can Google 5-step process to canceling your credit cards, because you have to not only call them up, but then follow up with certain communications to make sure it's reported properly. Because if you do it right, it will improve your score. But the way my daughter did it turned into a negative event. So make sure you do this properly. The final step is there are some debt negotiation companies that are available. Make sure you do your due diligence. You can free up hundreds of dollars a month if you find the right company and they do what they need to do for you. But again, you need to do your due diligence. Here I want to talk about a very important concept, and you need to understand the difference between good debt and bad debt. I am not suggesting to you that you're going to be debt-free or that debt-free is the way to go. It's not my recommendation. It's different for everybody. It's a personal decision. It's an economic decision, and everybody's choices are different. But let's go through this for a moment to understand the difference between the good debt and the bad debt. You want to really rank your debt not only by interest rates, but by utility. So a good debt, if you will, is a debt on your house, the mortgage. Most people cannot pay for a house free and clear. Many people end up having some sort of mortgage on their house, but that's a good debt. And the reason is that the property should be over time, certainly no guarantees, but it should be appreciating. It's an appreciating asset over time. And the interest rates are low and they're tax deductible. A bad debt, on the other hand, is your credit card debt or a debt for a car loan, which I find to be just, there's no right answer for car loans, for buying cars. But when you buy the car, the value of the car depreciates for most every car that you buy as soon as you take it off the lot. So you have a higher interest rate, non-tax deductible loan on an asset that is depreciating. Or you have a credit card balance where there really is no asset, but you're paying a high rate of interest and it is not tax deductible. Make sure you pay off your bad debt first before you pay off the good debt. So when managing your debt and planning, I want you to make a plan, set small goals for yourself, and I want to share with you a couple of strategies that you might want to think about in terms of paying off your debt. There's one of two ways to have it if you have a number of credit cards. First, you may want to find those with the lowest balances and pay those off first. That's how my daughter did it. And you start to then eliminate some cards that way. Or take a look at the cards that you have and see what is the highest interest rate, then the next, then the next, then the next. And start paying off the ones that have the higher interest rates first. Now, I don't mean just eliminate, or not pay the lower ones, but accelerate the payments on those that have the highest interest rates. And one of the important items to remember is it's okay to pay debt before savings. In other words, if you want to put more money into your emergency reserves, because believe it or not, if you do pay off the debt and accelerate that, it'll free up more cash flow and you'll have more for your savings. So that's a condensed version of how to think about and take a look at the debt that you have. I hope that some of these tips were good for you, because the more you can get a handle on your debt, the higher probability you will have that when you enter into this next chapter of retirement, you'll find more satisfaction.